Let me ask you something. Have you ever felt like someone was deeply into you, but then they pulled away, disappeared, acted cold, like nothing ever happened? And yet, every time you moved on or stopped chasing, they popped back up again, leaving you confused all over again. That right there is the signature dance of the avoidant. Because when avoidants are secretly obsessed with you, they don't show it like most people. They don't text, "Good morning," or flood your phone with compliments. No, they play games. And if you don't understand these games, you'll keep thinking you're the one doing something wrong. Game wanting the push-pull, they'll get close just long enough to taste your heart. Then suddenly, they'll disappear. You're left wondering what changed. Nothing changed. This is their fear of vulnerability kicking in. They want you, but they're terrified of needing you. Game twins and jealousy triggers, suddenly they'll mention a friend they were with, or post a photo with someone else. It's subtle, but it's intentional, because deep down they want to test if you care, if you react, if you're still hooked. Game 3, emotional breadcrumbs, they'll never open the whole door, just a crack, just enough to keep you guessing. A late night, thinking of you. Text, a compliment you've been starving for, they give the illusion of closeness without actual connection. Game 4A, hot eyes, cold words, their body language tells a story their mouth will never admit. They light up when they see you. They stare a second too long. But when you bring it up, they act confused, distant, detached. It's not in your head, it's the contradiction of someone obsessed but afraid. Game 50, silent check, ins they won't call. But suddenly, they'll view every single one of your stories, like a post from 2 months ago. Drop a reaction to your photo without saying a word. That's their way of saying, "I still care," without risking rejection. Game 60, dismissive deflection, you bring up emotions, and they joke. You ask a deep question and they shrug, they pretend it doesn't matter, but that's because it matters too much. Feeling things scares them. Game 70. Strategic absences, when they feel themselves getting too close, they vanish. Not because they don't care, but because they care too much. Disappearing is how they regain control of their emotions, or at least try to. Game 80, mixed messages. They say, "I'm not ready for anything serious," but then call you, the only person who gets them. They flirt one day and go cold the next. Their words and actions are never aligned. That's not a reflection of your worth. It's a sign of their emotional confusion. Game 90. Sabotaging when it's good. When things start feeling real, they pick a fight, disappear, or downplay what you had. Because vulnerability feels dangerous to them. They sabotage closeness before they can be abandoned. Now listen closely. Understanding this isn't about fixing them. It's about protecting you. You deserve consistency. You deserve clarity. You deserve someone whose love doesn't leave you guessing. If someone is playing mind games while being obsessed with you in secret, that's not romance. That's emotional warfare. You don't need to decode every signal. You need to decide, is this love or is this confusion dressed up as chemistry? Because true connection doesn't feel like a game you're always losing. It feels like peace. And peace doesn't need to play mind games to prove it's real. When someone is secretly obsessed with you but emotionally avoidant, their behavior doesn't align with the typical signs of affection or romantic pursuit. Instead of consistency, what you get is confusion. You don't receive warm, daily check-ins, heartfelt confessions, or emotionally open gestures. Instead, you get sudden bursts of attention followed by cold silences. They might text you out of nowhere with something meaningful or deeply personal, then vanish for days with no explanation. That's not because they're not interested. It's because they're fighting an internal battle between wanting to be close and fearing what that closeness could mean. Emotional availability feels dangerous to them. Intimacy exposes them, and exposure makes them feel unsafe. So rather than show their obsession through love and openness, they show it in unpredictable, scattered patterns that keep you emotionally off balance. They are constantly oscillating between the need to connect and the instinct to protect themselves. One day they lean in, open up, share a moment that feels almost sacred. The next day they act like you're just another person they know. This is not random. This is a protective mechanism. It's how they manage the discomfort of feeling vulnerable. It allows them to experience you without fully investing in you. It's emotional rationing, just enough to keep the obsession alive, never enough to feel truly exposed. They think about you often, but when the urge to get close builds up too much, their fear flips the switch. They pull away so they don't have to face the risk of being truly seen or rejected. This creates a cycle where they remain deeply involved with you in their mind, but avoidant in their actions. You are always in their thoughts, but rarely in their consistent reality. This inconsistency is their love language distorted by fear, and it can be incredibly addictive for you because the emotional highs are intense and rare, making you crave the next one like a reward. The avoidant person isn't calculating this deliberately in most cases. They're often unaware of how much they are driven by internal conflict, but to you, it feels personal. It feels like rejection, confusion, emotional whiplash. The truth is, it's obsession filtered through fear. It's attraction laced with avoidance. And unless you understand this dynamic, you'll spend all your energy trying to decode their actions instead of understanding that they are driven by a deeper emotional dilemma they don't yet know how to resolve. When someone is emotionally avoidant, the way they express desire is filtered through fear rather than openness. They don't come forward with honesty about how they feel, even when their feelings are strong. Instead, they play subtle games because direct connection makes them feel exposed. They might act distant, cool, even uninterested, but underneath that mask is often a strong emotional pull they don't know how to handle. That's why their behavior feels contradictory. One moment they say they don't want anything serious, and the next they're studying your every move, reacting to your stories, noticing when you shift your energy. Their obsession is not expressed through closeness, but through avoidance that keeps them emotionally safe. Mind games become their way of maintaining connection while protecting themselves from the discomfort of vulnerability. They might test your loyalty without admitting they want it, create distance to see if you chase them, or hint at jealousy without admitting they care. These actions aren't coming from indifference. They're coming from emotional panic. Avoidants want the reassurance of love without the cost of emotional intimacy. So they design situations where they can feel chosen without fully choosing. They create confusion to stay in control. Instead of saying they miss you, they might show up in your notifications or comment on something they never cared about before. Instead of asking you to stay, they might criticize you or make you feel like you're not enough, hoping to provoke a reaction that proves you're still invested. These aren't random behaviors. They're protective strategies disguised as disinterest. The mind games they play are not signs of a lack of care, they're signs of emotional conflict. They want to matter to you, but they don't want to be vulnerable in the process. They want connection, but they're terrified of what that connection could cost them. So they play from the sidelines, appearing and disappearing, pushing and pulling, always watching but rarely committing. You end up feeling emotionally exhausted, questioning your worth and doubting your instincts. But the chaos isn't about you. It's about them trying to control something that scares them how deeply they care. Their games are often silent signals of obsession, masked by distance, confusion, and inconsistency. They're hoping you'll prove your loyalty without them having to expose their own feelings. And if you don't see it for what it is, you'll think they're cold or unavailable when, in reality, they're emotionally overwhelmed and stuck in a loop of wanting love without knowing how to receive it. Emotional breadcrumbs are one of the most common tactics avoidants use when they're secretly obsessed with you but afraid of intimacy. Instead of fully engaging in a real, deep emotional connection, they offer small, calculated doses of attention, just enough to keep you emotionally invested without risking closeness themselves. These breadcrumbs might look like a random text after days of silence, a compliment that seems out of the blue, a like on your post that comes at just the right time, or a vague message late at night that stirs your emotions. It's never consistent, never complete, and never clear, but it's always enough to keep hope alive. This is what makes the breadcrumbing so powerful and so damaging. You're not given the full meal of connection, but you're kept hungry with little crumbs that spark your emotions and keep you engaged. You find yourself replaying small moments, analyzing short texts, wondering what they meant when they said something that felt deep. But it's all part of the pattern. When someone is obsessed with you but emotionally avoidant, giving you too much access feels threatening to them. So they carefully measure their energy. They'll give you just enough so you don't forget them, just enough so you question your decision to pull away, just enough so you feel there's something real there, even when everything else says otherwise. These emotional breadcrumbs are addictive because they activate your emotional reward system. They keep you in a state of anticipation, always hoping the next message will mean more, always thinking the next encounter will bring clarity. But the truth is, these crumbs are designed to keep you circling without ever arriving anywhere solid. For the avoidant, it allows them to feel connected to you without having to commit to anything real. They know they have your attention, so they don't have to risk rejection or vulnerability. They can stay in the shadows of the connection, controlling the pace, always one step away from intimacy. This strategy protects them from the discomfort of being fully seen or emotionally open. To them, love is safest when it's incomplete. The emotional breadcrumbs keep the obsession alive without demanding the emotional courage to step forward. You feel like you're in a relationship that never fully starts, constantly waiting for it to become what it's supposed to be. And because the attention comes unpredictably, it always feels more valuable when it arrives, even though it never truly satisfies your need for genuine connection. When someone is emotionally avoidant but secretly obsessed with you, their body often speaks a completely different language than their words. You'll notice how their eyes linger on you, how their posture shifts when you enter the room, how they light up for a moment before quickly covering it up. There's an energy in the way they look at you that feels undeniable, almost electric. It's in those fleeting glances, the way they lean in when you talk, the way their body stays just a little too close, even when their words are cool and casual. But then, the moment you try to bring clarity to the situation, they shut it down. You ask what they feel, and they act like it's nothing. You point out the tension, and they brush it off. Their mouth says, "You're imagining it," but everything about their behavior says, "I see you, I feel this." It creates a painful contradiction. You're reading their nonverbal cues, trusting your intuition, sensing the energy between you. But every time you try to name it, they make you question yourself. This is part of the avoidance emotional pattern. They express what they feel through physical closeness, stolen moments, silent intensity. But when asked to articulate it, they retreat behind a wall of detachment. It's safer for them to express desire without words because words can lead to responsibility. Words create expectations. And for someone who fears intimacy, expectations feel like pressure, like the beginning of losing control. So instead of admitting they care, they choose to leave it ambiguous. They let their eyes say what their mouth never will. They allow their presence to carry the weight of feelings they're too scared to verbalize. It's not just a communication issue, it's an emotional defense mechanism. If they can feel something and never say it, they never have to be held accountable for it. They never have to explain it or risk it being rejected. Their obsession is real, but it's trapped behind a fear of vulnerability. And so they become experts at mixed signals, giving you just enough to feel something strong, but never enough to build anything real. You're left reading between the lines, decoding every look, every shift in their tone, trying to make sense of what they can't say out loud. Their silence becomes a language of its own, one filled with longing, fear, confusion, and emotional paralysis that leaves you constantly unsure of where you stand. When an avoidant is secretly obsessed with you, one of the most telling signs is how they find quiet ways to stay connected without actually making contact. They may not call, text, or initiate conversations, but they're always there, watching silently from a distance. You'll notice they're the first to view your stories. They'll like an old post just enough to make their presence known, or they'll react to something small you share without following up with any actual words. These silent check-ins are not accidental. They're carefully chosen actions meant to keep you aware of their presence without demanding anything from them emotionally. They want you to know they're still paying attention, but they don't want to risk rejection by reaching out directly. It's a form of control. They control the interaction, the pace, the distance, and how emotionally exposed they allow themselves to be. To them, watching from afar feels safer than engaging, but the intention behind it is deeply emotional. It's their way of staying close to you while still protecting themselves. They want the reassurance that they still matter to you, that you haven't moved on, that they still hold space in your mind. So instead of expressing this openly, they engage in digital proximity. They leave digital fingerprints everywhere, viewing, liking, reacting, but never typing a message that says what they really feel. This form of interaction is designed to keep the emotional connection alive without any of the vulnerability real connection requires. It's not lazy or forgetful, it's strategic. These silent check-ins also create emotional confusion for you. You feel their presence, you know they're still engaging, but you have no idea what it means. You're left wondering why they're watching but not speaking, why they're interacting passively instead of reaching out directly. That confusion is part of the emotional game avoidants often play when they're overwhelmed by feelings they can't manage. Their obsession is disguised as quiet surveillance because to them, loving from a distance is less threatening than being emotionally involved. They can still feel connected, still feel relevant, still feel in control. And this quiet proximity is often their way of saying, I'm not ready to engage, but I don't want to be forgotten. It's emotional limbo where they stay involved just enough to remain significant in your life while avoiding the emotional labor of direct interaction. This creates a loop that keeps you emotionally invested without clarity or closure. When you try to get emotionally close to an avoidant who's secretly obsessed with you, you often run into a wall of deflection. Every time you bring up something real, something meaningful, something vulnerable, they dodge it. They might change the subject, crack a joke, shrug it off, or act like it's not that deep. You can pour your heart out and be met with silence or a light-hearted response that leaves you feeling foolish for even trying. This is their defense mechanism in action. It's not that they don't feel deeply. It's that they don't know how to sit in that emotional space without feeling exposed or unsafe. Vulnerability to them is a risk, not a connection. When things get emotionally heavy, they don't lean in, they retreat. Deflection is how they create emotional distance without physically leaving. It allows them to stay in your presence without actually being open. You'll notice that every time the conversation starts to touch on commitment, emotions, or the depth of the relationship, they find a way to downplay it. They'll say things like, "You're overthinking," "It's not that serious," or "Let's not get too deep." These aren't random comments. They are intentional emotional blocks designed to protect their inner world from being touched. What's confusing is that in other moments, they can be incredibly engaged. They listen intently, remember small details about you, show up when you least expect it, and even initiate affection. But the moment the energy shifts into a space that requires emotional accountability, they switch, they shut down, they mock seriousness, avoid eye contact, or physically move away. This inconsistency creates a push-pull dynamic where you're constantly second-guessing yourself. You wonder if you're too intense, too needy, too emotional. But what's really happening is that your presence is triggering something they haven't resolved within themselves, the fear of intimacy. The dismissive deflection is a shield. It lets them feel in control. It lets them manage their fear without confronting it. It lets them maintain a relationship without ever stepping into the full vulnerability that love demands. They'd rather keep things surface level than risk being emotionally naked. And what makes it more complex is that underneath all that deflection is often a deep yearning to connect. But that desire is buried beneath layers of self-protection. They want love, but they're scared of needing it. So they hide their obsession behind sarcasm, distractions, emotional avoidance, and subtle disconnections that keep the relationship from getting too close